Every person in the field of sensory impairments needs to be aware of the incredible significance of the senses for cognitive development and the development of language. And it's because of the fact that the first step in the process of cognitive development is the acquisition of sensory information. Learning begins with acquiring sensory information. If a person can't acquire sensory information, the learning process stops right there. So, after sensory information is acquired, the next step in the process is storing that information and then retrieving it when you need it and using it. That is what learning is. That is cognition. No sensory intake, no gathering of information through sensory channels, no cognitive development. A long time ago, Jean Piaget talked about child development in terms of global stages of cognitive development. The first stage of cognitive development, the skills that typically developing children learn from birth to about 2 years old, is what Piaget called the sensorimotor stage of development. And here is what happens in regards to learning. The primary behavior of learning at the sensorimotor stage is exploring. The sensorimotor stage learner, the typically developing infant or toddler, is attracted to the things in their environment. To anything they are attracted. They go and immediately find out 2 things about it. 1. What is it like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like when I touch it? So, children are busy answering the "what is it like" question. And then, they ask the other major sensorimotor question, what does it do? And with that knowledge, they develop the basic concepts that make them able to understand the world that they live in. That is every educator's goal. What any individual at that stage of development need, regardless of how old they are, are the sensory experiences that allow them to make sense of the world they live in. How do sensorimotor stage learners acquire information? The primary sensory system at the sensorimotor stage is always touch, and vision becomes, through that period of development, more and more important as time goes on. But even as vision becomes more and more important, touch remains either more important or as important. So, what we do for the sensorimotor stage learner is to create opportunities for sensory learning to support the development of thoughts about people, objects, actions, and places. That is the curriculum of sensorimotor level learning. And all those things need to be learned about tactually, but also using vision, hearing, taste, etc. The QTVI, Teacher of the Deaf, QTMSI, has to ensure that the information intake in the sensory systems is as efficient as possible. There are 3 response levels based on how the learner interacts with the media. The first is the attention level. Did the learner pay attention to the sensory input as it was presented by the teacher? The second one is the exploration level. Did the child interact with the learning media? It's very exciting when learners are at this level, because what they are trying to do is get more information about the question, what is it like? That is called exploration, and that is the primary behavior for learning at the sensorimotor stage. The third response level is the function level, and that is when the learner not only tries to explore the object by touching it, looking at it, tasting it, smelling it, but they are trying to find out its function. What does it do? And from function, children move to symbols and meaning, a completely different level. Here, we introduce the third question for the learner. The first question is, what is it like? The second question is, what does it do? The question that begins the transition end of sensorimotor and the beginning of early pre-operational stage is, what is its name? Now we're talking about developing concepts and understanding the language used to name common objects, an ever-widening variety of objects, including those that are more commonly found in the environment. Amazing, don't you think?